Hi, I'm Doug Ross, editorial page editor at the Times Media Company, here with Glenda Ritz, who's running for Indiana Superintendent of Public Instruction as a Democrat. Let's talk a little bit about your differences between you and the incumbent, Tony Bennett.
Well, I think there are several differences. The first would be our approach to high-stakes testing. Tony Bennett believes in high-stakes testing, and I do not believe the stakes should be high with assessment. So we would have a different approach when it comes to assessment of students.
Okay, now you talked earlier about your idea of the growth model that his department has created under his tutelage, that it's not the kind of growth model that you prefer. So could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's fairly simple for the audience to understand. We have a pass-fail approach in ISTEP. Students either pass the test or they fail the test. And then Tony Bennett has put an artificial growth model on top of that to estimate the growth that a student might make over a course period of time. I want to replace that system with a true growth model so that we really know the students' levels. For example, in reading, the current testing approach of pass-fail doesn't really tell you what level of reading a student is performing. But a true growth assessment would tell you that in fourth grade you have sixth grade readers, and fifth grade readers, and fourth grade readers, and second grade readers, so that the teacher can really provide the proper resources and instruction that's needed for each child in her class.
Okay, and speaking of the reading level, one of the things that Indiana's done is say you have to read at a third grade level to get beyond third grade, basically. And so now, first of all, how do you deal with the K to 3 component of that? And then how do you deal with the 4 to 12 component of the students who already are not reading where they should be?
Well, I'm a firm believer that students should be reading by grade 3. Grade 3 is a pivotal year, so I agree that that's an important aspect that we have to have in place for instruction. How we go about that is where Tony Bennett and I differ. I believe that if we had true growth measurements in place from grade K, that we would know what level students are performing, and we could continually improve and provide the proper support. Having a pass-fail test for little 8-year-olds is not the proper approach to say to a little third grader, you're a failure, but rather we know where you are and what we need to do to have you improve in your reading. I believe in the state of Indiana, the mandatory age for school attendance is age 7. And typically, students who may come to us, I know in my district, that in first grade, many of them have not had kindergarten, nor have they had preschool. So in essence, when they come to us as first graders, they're pretty much 2 years behind. So we have to work on catching them up. And sometimes we retain students at the kindergarten level. So there's one retention. Now with Tony Bennett putting in a gateway, so to speak, at grade 3, there's 2 retentions. And research will bear out that once you've retained a child twice, the increase and the likelihood of them dropping out is very great. You're really almost making the dropout rate at grade 3. You're deciding how that's going to happen. And then we have the government actually keeping a list of students that are retained at grade 3 to then have them take those tests next year. I propose that we have a reading assessment program whereby we always know the levels of the students and they're continuing to improve, not only in the younger grades, but K-12. I think that secondary teachers need to know what level of reading their students are performing when they enter their classrooms so they can provide the proper materials and instruction for them.
Okay. We talk about K-12 education. Of course, we are ignoring the higher education for the moment, but let's talk about the K in that. Kindergarten isn't even a required grade level for Indiana. Should it be? And should it be required as a halftime grade level, as has been traditionally? Should it be full day? What does that mean for funding for education?
Well, I am a proponent of having students attend kindergarten. That early learning program, in fact, I'm a proponent of preschool. So early learning is needed for students to be able to be ready for the rigor of the education system that we have in place. In order for that, in Indiana currently, we have only half-day funding for full-day programs that we're implementing. And more, the students are only counted as a half. They're not counted as a full-funded student. So that's the first thing that should happen, is that we should provide full funding for full-day kindergarten for every student. So, but we only get half the funding for the students, and so that should be changed. And that, in addition to that, we need to have as many students coming to kindergarten as possible. Now, there are many states that mandate kindergarten. They do that by lowering the age. Like I said, Indiana has age 7. We're behind the times in the nation when it comes to having an younger age of students attending school.
Okay, let's. We talked about funding briefly. Let's talk about your funding philosophies for public versus private.
I believe public dollars should be used for public schools. That's simple. I believe that that's how that should work, and that we need to have as many dollars as we possibly can for the funding of public schools. They're underfunded now. Under Tony Bennett's watch, we've cut funding, and we need to restore some funding back that we did lose so that we can operate our schools. But then we also have the issue of charter schools. With more and more charter schools being added to Indiana's roster of schools, the less money there is to spread out amongst all of us to be able to do a quality job with our students.
Okay. Looking forward over the next 4 years, 4 years from now, assuming you're elected, what would you like to say you accomplished?
Oh my goodness. I'd like to say that we've revamped the assessment system to not have the high stakes that it has now, and have true measures for accountability for our schools and our school districts. I'd like to say that we've run summits, district summits throughout the entire state of Indiana, and that I will have reorganized the Department of Education to actually support the needs and the challenges in the individual school districts and communities. I'd like to say that we will have looked at the high school curriculum to be sure that students are getting prepared for vocational, career tech, college, whatever their pathway they might want to pursue, and that we will have implemented the coursework in order for that to happen without the barriers that stand in the way right now of high-stakes testing to get a diploma. So I would like to see kids have the relevance that they need to the coursework they're doing, have the rigor that we need to provide. I would like to say that in 4 years we will not be teaching to the test as we are now in Indiana, where we do a little bit of curriculum, teach to a test, and do a little bit of curriculum, teach to a test, and we continue that all year long. We need to provide students with good relationships building at school. They need to get excited about school. We need to go in depth in our subject matters and our topics, and kids need to feel like they can do that. And right now, we're just teaching to the test. So I'd like to say that in 4 years, that will not be the case, that we'll have some really high-level, rigorous inquiry learning going on in Indiana. We'll have reading levels vastly improved because of an assessment model that really will show the levels of students reading and math, and have some really quality learning going on in the classroom.
Okay, fair enough. We've talked about preparing students and how they should be prepared. We've talked about the idea that a pass-fail test doesn't necessarily show how well prepared a student is. But the fact is, the election is a pass-fail referendum for you and for Tony Bennett. So headed into the November 6th test, what makes you better prepared, do you think?
Well, I think that the education community, for one, is, for lack of a better word, fed up with what's going on right now in terms of instruction in our classroom and being relegated to how we're going to teach to the test. And that's probably the biggest component of my election, our educators. And I think the educators are talking to community members, and the word's getting out there about what's really happening in our schools underneath government control. We have government taking over our schools. We have government actually making lists of our third graders that have been retained. We have government deciding how our curriculum is going to be paced and how the assessments are going to be in place. We have government deciding how we're going to judge our schools A to F, and as a consequence judging our own communities. So I think educators and the general voters are getting fed up with how we are running the system currently.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Again, this has been a special edition of the NWI.com Political Roundtable. Thank you for viewing. On behalf of Glenda Ritz and Doug Ross, thank you for watching.
Thank you.